What audiences often interpret as passion on screen rarely reflects the reality behind the camera. When viewers talk about the intensity of Caitríona Balfe's intimate film scenes, they usually imagine chemistry flowing naturally between performers. The truth, however, is far more controlled, technical, and emotionally demanding than most fans realize. That gap between perception and reality is where the real shock begins. Caitríona Balfe has built a reputation for discipline and professionalism, especially in moments that require vulnerability. She has often approached intimate scenes not as emotional indulgence, but as carefully structured work that must be executed with precision. Every movement, pause, and boundary is discussed in advance, leaving little room for spontaneity. What looks effortless on screen is usually the result of intense preparation. One of the most misunderstood aspects of these scenes is the environment in which they are filmed. Far from being private, the set is often crowded with crew members, lighting rigs, and technical staff. Cameras are repositioned repeatedly, scenes are stopped and restarted, and the emotional rhythm is constantly interrupted. The illusion of intimacy exists only for the audience, not for the performers living the moment. This technical setting creates a unique psychological pressure. Caitríona Balfe has spoken about the challenge of switching emotional states quickly, stepping into vulnerability and then stepping out again without lingering effects. Unlike other scenes, intimate moments demand emotional openness while simultaneously requiring detachment. That contradiction is mentally exhausting, even for experienced actors. Preparation does not end when the camera starts rolling. Long before filming, boundaries must be clearly defined and agreed upon, not just between actors but with the entire production team. These discussions are essential for trust, yet they also force performers to confront their own limits repeatedly. The process can be draining before a single frame is captured. What shocks many fans is that the most difficult part often comes after the scene is finished. Once the director calls cut, actors are expected to reset immediately, returning to a neutral emotional state. There is rarely time to process what just happened, even though the scene may appear deeply personal to viewers. That emotional whiplash is something audiences never see. Caitríona Balfe's ability to make these scenes feel authentic has sometimes worked against her. Because the performance feels real, viewers assume comfort or enjoyment behind the scenes. In reality, convincing intimacy often requires suppressing personal discomfort in service of the story. The better the performance, the more invisible the effort becomes. Another hidden pressure comes from audience reaction itself. Intimate scenes are endlessly replayed, analyzed, and discussed long after filming ends. Actors must live with the knowledge that a controlled, professional moment will be consumed as entertainment indefinitely. For someone as private as Caitríona Balfe, that permanence carries weight. This is why she has historically been cautious when discussing such scenes publicly. Silence is not avoidance, but protection of the work and of herself. Over-explaining can distort the audience's relationship with the story, shifting focus away from narrative toward voyeurism. Maintaining that balance is part of the job. There is also a responsibility toward co-stars that is rarely acknowledged. Mutual respect and clear communication are essential, because trust is the foundation that makes these scenes possible. Any misunderstanding can ripple through a production, affecting morale and performance. Professional intimacy relies on boundaries more than emotion. The shocking truth is not that Caitríona Balfe performs intimate scenes, but how much control and restraint they require. These moments are less about romance and more about endurance, focus, and emotional regulation. They demand strength rather than surrender. Understanding that changes how the scenes are viewed entirely. When audiences romanticize what happens on screen, they miss the reality of the labor involved. Intimate scenes are not escapes from craft, but some of its most demanding expressions. Caitríona Balfe's work highlights how skill can transform discomfort into storytelling. That transformation is the real achievement, even if it remains invisible. By recognizing the discipline behind these performances, the narrative shifts. What once seemed effortless becomes evidence of professionalism under pressure. The shock lies not in what is shown, but in what is required to show it convincingly. And that truth challenges almost every assumption fans bring with them when they watch. The conversation around Caitríona Balfe's intimate scenes deepens when the focus shifts from technique to consequence. What happens during filming may be controlled and professional, but the emotional residue does not always disappear when the day ends. Actors are expected to compartmentalize instantly, moving from vulnerability to normalcy without pause. That expectation alone is something most audiences never consider. For Caitríona Balfe, maintaining that separation has been essential to longevity in the industry. She has consistently emphasized the importance of drawing a firm line between character and self. Without that boundary, intimate scenes risk bleeding into personal identity, a danger that can quietly erode mental well-being over time. The discipline required to prevent that is substantial. One of the most overlooked pressures is repetition. A scene that appears brief on screen may be filmed dozens of times from different angles. Each take requires the same emotional access, the same vulnerability, and the same focus. By the final take, exhaustion replaces adrenaline, yet performance quality cannot drop. That repetition compounds stress rather than diffusing it. There is also the issue of public ownership. Once released, intimate scenes are no longer controlled by the performer. They are clipped, shared, debated, and sometimes reduced to moments divorced from narrative context. For actors like Caitríona Balfe, this afterlife of a scene can feel invasive, even when the work was done with intention and care. The permanence of digital media adds another layer of pressure. Fans often confuse chemistry with comfort. Strong on-screen connection is interpreted as ease or enjoyment, when in reality it may reflect trust built through rigorous professional standards. Caitríona Balfe's performances succeed precisely because she approaches intimacy with structure rather than impulse. That method protects both the story and the people involved. Another shocking reality is how rarely actors are asked how these scenes affect them emotionally. Discussions tend to focus on audience reaction or narrative impact, not on the toll of repeated vulnerability. Caitríona Balfe's restraint in interviews reflects an awareness that oversharing can shift attention away from the craft. Silence becomes a form of self-preservation. The presence of intimacy coordinators has improved conditions, but it has not eliminated emotional strain. Guidelines create safety, not immunity. Even within a respectful framework, the demand to expose emotional layers repeatedly is taxing. Professionalism does not cancel human response. Caitríona Balfe's approach highlights an important truth about performance. Intimacy on screen is not an extension of personal desire, but a constructed illusion achieved through discipline. The success of that illusion depends on the actor's ability to manage discomfort without displaying it. That skill is rarely acknowledged outside the industry. What shocks many fans when they learn this is how unromantic the process actually is. There is no emotional crescendo behind the scenes, no lingering sentiment, and no private moment preserved. Everything is functional, monitored, and time-bound. The artistry lies in making something mechanical appear emotionally rich. This understanding reframes how audiences might view such scenes. Instead of seeing them as moments of exposure, they can be recognized as demonstrations of control. Caitríona Balfe's work stands as an example of how restraint can produce authenticity. That paradox is at the heart of the craft. The lasting impact of these scenes is not found in headlines or fan theories, but in the quiet discipline required to perform them repeatedly without losing oneself. That reality rarely fits into sensational narratives. Yet it is the truth behind the image. Ultimately, the shocking truth is not about intimacy itself, but about endurance. Caitríona Balfe's ability to navigate these scenes speaks to resilience rather than vulnerability. Understanding that shifts the conversation from spectacle to respect. And once that shift happens, the scenes are no longer shocking for what they show, but for what they demand.